Hello guys, and welcome to my latest Templar build. This is a super high HP, Blazing Shield Stamina Templar build, and what makes it so good is that it's very resistant to incoming burst while still maintaining a large amount of burst itself. I find this build really strong to counter the burst meta sort of in the game right now, just due to that really high HP value and using Blazing Shield to return damage on your opponent. So let's jump right into it. We got our max stats here, guys. 44.6k health. I do have an Emperorship Alliance bonus, so I am sitting at normally just under 43k health in PvP on this build. I've got just about 30k stamina. And then on my weapon damage on my Greatsword bar is 2,600 unbuffed, 32% crit, and then of course it's a little bit lower on my bow bar. Just about 1,200 stamina recovery unbuffed, so definitely decent recoveries on this build. Physical and spell resistance, not bad at all either. So this is a good build. It's very chunky all around. I've got a high HP value to prevent me from getting bursted down, and then of course I've got the powerful offense on it as well. So let's take a look at the buffs that I have here. The boon that you're going to run on this build is the Serpent. After playing around, I was at a loss, kind of. I decided between the Warrior or the Serpent for this setup. If you feel like you don't need the extra regen, go for the Warrior and you'll have the bonus weapon damage. But if you want to have the extra regen, so you get a little bit more staying power, you can always do the Serpent. I think that the Serpent is the better choice for this build, but Warrior is definitely not a bad choice. I am a Vampire. This is not part of the build, guys. You don't have to be a Vampire for this setup. It's just a personal preference for me on my Templar. I have the Minor Berserk buff. This is because I am running a 2-piece Slime Craw, which gives me the Minor Berserk buff, and this is my Helm and Shoulder set. And then finally, the food that you're going to run with this build is the max health, max stamina food. Bulk up that max stamina and that max health. So important to give those two max stats the highest value possible for this setup. And the potions that you're going to use for this setup, guys, I found the best bet. That gives you all your buffs all around. Where are they hiding here? Essence of Weapon Crit. They restore your max health, they're going to restore your stamina, and they're also going to grant you your Major Savagery buff, which increases your weapon crit by 10% for 47.6 seconds. Okay, so let's move on to the gear, guys. For this build, I am running 2 separate 5-piece sets, and I'm running them on swap between my weapons. So the first 5-piece set that I'm running on my bow swap is Plague Doctor. This is going to give me max health, healing taken, and then it'll give me a whopping 6k maximum health bonus when I swap to my bow bar. If we look at my max health when I swap between my weapons, 36.5k, jumping all the way up to 44.6k on my bow bar. So I increase my maximum health by about 8,000 when I swap weapons. Now this value will, if you look, I have my Greatsword out here. When I swap to my bow, it doesn't heal you for the health that you swap out for when you swap between the weapons. So it'll bring your health down, but that's not such a big deal for this build, guys. The big thing for this build is that you have that high maximum value for your Blazing Shield to scale off of. The bow is infused, and I've got it with a weapon damage and spell damage enchant. This is to buff my weapon and spell damage by a bonus 417 base. This works out to be about 600 weapon damage after my bonuses are applied to it. And then, of course, I've got the Plague Doctor Curious infused, and then my Plague Doctor jewelry, all healthy to go along with the max health on this build, and then all of the enchants on them are maximum weapon damage. On my Greatsword swap, I've got the 5-piece Sword Singer. So this means when I swap to my Greatsword, I get a bonus 445 weapon damage on my two-handed abilities. I'm running a huge two-handed damage kit on this build. I'm using a lot of the Greatsword skills in order to deal my damage on this setup. This is a Sharpened Greatsword. I'd recommend Sharpened or Nirnhoned or Precise, but Sharpened being your #1 choice. And then the enchant on here, I have magic damage to restore stamina. It's really up to you guys. Disease enchant's an excellent choice as well, or whatever other enchant you'd want to run on your Greatsword bar. I'd recommend an enchant that does damage, because this is going to be your burst bar. The damage that you're going to deal is going to come off your Greatsword bar. And then, of course, the rest of my Sword Singer gear, I've got here the belt, the boots, the legs, and the gloves. Now, if you take a look at my gear here, guys, it's all enchanted with Hacky Joes. They are a little expensive. These are the tri-stat glyphs. They are expensive to get, but if you can't afford them, it's very good for this build. If you can't afford the tri-stat glyphs, you can always do max health and max stamina glyphs instead until you can eventually upgrade to tri-stat glyphs on the build. The tri-stat is so great for this build, though, because we do use Blazing Shield a lot, and this is going to give me a high maximum Magicka value. So I have about 13,000 max Magicka on this Stam build, meaning that I can cast 2 to 3 Blazing Shields before I'm out of Magicka. And then I've got the 2-piece Slime Craw on. This stuff is both divines. Ideally, all the gear that I'm wearing should be infused to pump up that max stat as high as possible. One thing that you don't really have to worry about on this build is your crit resistance, because Blazing Shield is your primary defense for it. We also have Brawler on the Greatsword bar, which is going to be another shield defense. So your critical resistance isn't a huge deal on this build. If you can get all your gear in infused with Hacky Joes, that's going to be your best bet for the build, guys. So, the reason that I went Slime Craw on this build is because it grants you the minor Berserk buff at all times. This is a buff that a Templar does not natively come by. The only 2 places that you can get this buff in the game is by either being a Nightblade and running Relentless Focus or any morph of it, and that will give you the minor Berserk buff. But if you're not a Nightblade, you have to use a Resto Staff, and you have to use the morph called Combat Prayer, and it's not a very powerful heal, but it gives you the minor Berserk buff for 8 seconds. Seeing as I'm neither of those things, I don't have a Resto Staff on, and I'm not a Nightblade, this is the best damage set that you can wear in replacement if you don't have that buff. This is better than running 1 Kenna and 1 Veldrith for the 2 weapon damage bonuses together. This is going to give you more damage than that alternative. So, the Slime Craw set is also really easy to get, guys. You get it from doing Wayrest Sewers 1. It's not a hard dungeon. It's super easy to do. So the helm's easy to get, the shoulder's easy to get, and if you want to just have flat damage on your build, like just increase all of your damage by a good flat amount and you're not a Nightblade, Slime Craw is the best bet for your helm and shoulder options. And finally, guys, Slime Craw will increase the damage of your Blazing Shield. Let's take a look at the skills I'm running. So we're going to start on the Greatsword bar. I did mention that I have a powerful Greatsword kit on this build. Now, if we look at my buffed Greatsword damage, guys, it's 3,063 weapon damage on my Greatsword. The buff off your Sword Singers here, the 445 weapon damage, this is actually an invisible buff, so you don't see it appearing on your stat page. But where you do see the buff is in your tooltips. If you look when I buff here, I'm sitting at just about a 7k tooltip on my critical rush. Now, for a build that is as tanky as this build is, that's a really hard-hitting crit rush. You can't be upset about that number, especially with the max health on this build. I was really happy to reach that 7k mark on my crit rush. So the first ability we've got is Executioner. This, of course, is going to be your Greatsword Execute. I like Executioner over the other morph. It's really up to you guys. Executioner is going to deal ultimately more damage when you go for the Execute, whereas the other morph is going to give you a bit of AoE pressure. This build definitely is not lacking in AoE, so Executioner is a very good option for it. The next ability on the bar, guys, is Crit Rush. We talked about this. This is going to be your primary gap closer as well as your primary combo dealer. You're going to Blazing Shield up, bow heavy attack into your Crit Rush, and hopefully by the time you make contact with your target, your Blazing Shield will explode on top of your Crit Rush damage. The next ability here is Repentance. An incredible skill for sustain, guys. Repentance is going to give you all of your minor resource regeneration buffs just for having it slotted, and then on top of it, when something dies, you can use Repentance to pull health and stamina out of the dead body. This being a max health, max stamina build, Repentance is a no-brainer. It's one of the Templar's best sustain skills, so there you go. The next ability is Rally. This is going to be your primary heal. The only heal, actually, on this build is Rally. This is going to be a good heal over time, as well as a powerful burst heal when you reactivate it. It's also going to give me my major weapon damage bonus, increasing my weapon damage by 20%, and this lasts for 33 seconds. And then finally, the last skill on my Greatsword bar is Brawler. Now, this is something that a lot of people have talked to me about, and they've said, why do you use Brawler, Jack? That's such a dumb skill. It's actually not. It's a quite powerful skill. If you look at the damage on Brawler, it's going to deal 5k upfront damage with the initial attack, and then it's going to be an additional 7k damage over time for 10 seconds on any target that it hits. Now, this is also an AoE. If Brawler just gave me these offensive bonuses, it would already be an excellent choice for an AoE damage dealer / dot on my Greatsword. But on top of it, Brawler's going to give me a damage shield. I am in PvP, so the size of this damage shield is shrunk by being in PvP, so 1,400 damage shield for each target that I hit. Every target that I hit is going to double the strength of the shield. So if I hit 4 people, I'll be looking at almost a 6k damage shield on my brawler, so it's quite powerful. Not only that, but it's the damage and it's going to dot them up. Excellent skill, one of the most overlooked greatsword skills, I think, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. You guys will see me rocking it in PvP when you see a bit of the action of this build later on in the video. And then finally, guys, the last ability on my greatsword here is Onslaught. This is one of, if not the best ultimate that I've come by. This was newly added with the 1 Tamriel patch. Strike an enemy with a vicious blow, dealing 18k physical damage and ignoring the target's physical and spell resist. On top of it, the amount of armor and spell resistance that I ignore will be added to my character. And then finally, the last bit of Onslaught is the Morph. Killing an enemy with this ability immediately refunds the ultimate's cost. If you can time this as your execute, it is so powerful. It's going to give you a huge armor buff. On top of it, you're going to kill your target, and it's going to return your ultimate. Not only that, but this ability hits so hard, guys. Ignoring physical and spell resistance is so powerful. You just cut through people like butter, especially in PvP where people like to make themselves tanky. You don't natively come by too many mobs in PvE that have a huge amount of physical and spell resist, but in PvP you'll be much more likely to come by a player with a lot of physical and spell resist. So not only will this debuff them if you don't kill them, but it'll give you the armor as well. And it just cuts through people like butter. A great ultimate for killing those really tanky tanks. It just cuts through them. Okay, so let's look at the bow bar. The first ability I have here, guys, is Poison Injection. 4,500 upfront damage, and then, of course, that super deadly damage over time ability, dealing extra damage as their health begins to drop below 50%. This is an excellent execute. You dot someone up with this, dot them up with Brawler, put your Blazing Shield up, and then go in for the pressure, and they just melt from the dots on top of your additional pressure. But yeah, Poison Injection, talked about it a lot in the past. Excellent, excellent bow ability. Probably the best bow ability in the game. And then Magnum Shot. Now, I know a lot of people like to run Draining Shot for the heal, but I still like Magnum Shot. I love this ability because it knocks your opponent back and disorients them, as well as knocking you back. So you can use this as kind of like the poor man's Bolt Escape to kind of move your character around the map. You can also use Magnum Shot to move around if you're immobilized. So I chose this skill for the damage, the stun, and of course the mobility. Magnum Shot's also great because it helps you set your crit rush combo. You Magnum Shot away from your target, effectively making a larger gap in between you and your target, allowing you to follow it up with that crit rush. The next ability I've got on the bar is Blazing Shield. This is your primary defensive ability on this build, guys. The huge 43k maximum health value that we've got, this just gives you a big Blazing Shield. Like, I don't know what to say. It's like a 10k Blazing Shield in PvP. Bigger than that, it's like 17k in PvE. And yeah, it's a fantastic, an absolutely fantastic ability to have, especially on a Stamina Templar. This gives you the ability to put your channeled focus down, restoring that magicka so you can keep your Blazing Shield up, and then you just keep cycling your shield. Anything that jumps on top of you, like Night Blades with ambush, etc., is going to be repelled hard by the Blazing Shield. And then, of course, you have your channel focus down, so it allows you to be able to recast and use this ability a lot on a stamina-based build. The next ability on our bar is Extended Ritual. I mean, this is a no-brainer Templar PvP skill, I think. Remove up to 5 harmful effects from yourself, immediately healing you. Also puts down a healing over time effect. And of course, the ring that this puts down is going to give me major mending while I'm in it, allowing me to have 30% increased healing, and that's just from my Templar passives. So this is kind of your purge, very important for PvP, but I find with Blazing Shield, you don't have to use the purge as often because you can just keep cycling your shields to take the damage and, of course, explode for the damage against your targets as well. And then finally, guys, Channeled Focus. This is going to grant me Major Resolve and Major Ward, increasing my physical and spell resist, and it's also going to give me the equivalent of about 480 Magicka Recovery when I put it down. Of course, to refresh this, all you have to do is walk back through the circle, and it'll last for 8 seconds. The circle itself will last for 18 seconds. So, there you go. Your primary defense on this build, guys, as you're running away from stuff, is just going to be to cycle your Blazing Shields and your Channeled Focus, keep your armoring buff up and keeping your shield up. On top of that, you'll hurt stuff that jumps on top of you, so it gives you a really great option to stay alive without having to spend any stamina at all. And then finally, guys, the last ability that I have on my bow bar is Devouring Swarm. This is the ultimate that I chose as a Vampire Templar. I decided to pick this one. If you guys aren't a Vampire, of course, I give you the full freedom to choose the ultimate of your choice. Nova is an excellent option here because it does kind of the same thing that Devouring Swarm is going to do. It'll make you tankier and give you that kind of zone control on top of your Blazing Shield. Morph to Solar Disturbance for the snare. This Nova will synergize really well with Blazing Shield. And of course, you can replace it with any other ultimate of your choice. The Bow ultimate, also a great option. Either morph of it's going to be very powerful as well. Okay, guys, so let's take a look at the champion points. So we're going to start in the green tree here. So we've got 30 points in our first tree. We got 20 in Warlord, 5 in Magician, 2 in Sprinter, and 3 in Bashing Focus. We do use a lot of Magicka abilities, so it didn't hurt to dump into Magician. And of course, we have a lot of Stamina abilities, so Warlord being a great option here. I am Sprinting and I am Bashing, so these are also important to some degree. In my Lover tree, I've got 74 in Mooncalf to increase my stamina recovery. You saw that I have pretty decent stamina recovery on this build. Something typical of me when I play builds is that I don't run a lot of recovery. So this build has higher recovery than most that I will play. I've got 5 into Arcanist for a little bit of Magicka recovery, and then 3 into Healthy. I am wearing Slime Craw. I know I'm a vampire, but if I wasn't a vampire and I was wearing Slime Craw, especially as a Nord, it would be a good idea to dump more into Healthy as well. And then in my Shadow tree, I've got 65 in Tumbling and 10 in Shadow Ward. Tumbling important, roll, dodge, and break free, such a big part of PvP, especially on a stand build. You need to be able to roll, you need to be able to break free. I am wearing 5 medium armor, so can't go wrong with Tumbling. 10 in Shadow Ward to reduce the cost of blocking, because blocking's also important. You're going to block in PvP, you got to block some stuff. And on this build, I will be blocking as well. Okay, so in the blue tree here, I've got 20 in Bless to increase the effectiveness of healing done by 8.1%. And then I've got 10 in Elemental Expert. This is just to increase the damage of my Blazing Shield by a little bit. Blazing Shield's the one magic damaging ability that I have. Most of the damage it does is going to be returned off of just the fact that I got a big shield, and then of course Burning Light proccing off my Blazing Shield. Burning Light's going to be a physical damage though, because I am a stamina based build. So this is just to increase the damage that my Blazing Shield does when it blows up on everybody. In my Atronach tree, I've got 22 in Melee Weapon Expert and 15 in Bow Expert. Now, I dumped more in Melee Weapon Expert because this is primarily a Greatsword damage-dealing build. Bow Expert, of course, is not a waste at all, guys. I'm going to do lots of bow attacks with this build as well, light and heavy, so a few points in Bow Expert doesn't hurt either. And then finally, in my Ritual tree, I've got 10 in Precise Strikes, 10 in Piercing, and 100 in Mighty. I went with 100 in Mighty because this is not a heavy crit build. This is just a pure damage build, so Mighty is your best bet here. Last Stand being a pretty cool ultimate to get access to in this tree with 120. I gain Major Heroism. It's nice, especially on a Vampire, because then it allows me to pull my swarms a little bit quicker. Definitely not a needed passive, but a cool one to get access to. Now in this tree, the important passives, number 1, Perfect Strike. You need Perfect Strike on this build, guys. 12% weapon crit, can't go wrong with that. But you will get that, of course, if you're dumping into Mighty anyway. And then finally, another passive that is pretty important to this build is Spell Precision. My Blazing Shield is a Magicka-based damage ability, so having the 12% spell crit doesn't hurt at all either. It's going to allow my Blazing Shield to crit a little bit, increasing the damage that it can pump out. And then finally, guys, we'll take a look at my red tree. Starting in the Steed, 10 medium armor, 10 spell shield, and 10 in resistant. I've always said, guys, a well-balanced red tree is the strongest that you can get. So you see that I've mixed it in here, 10 in each tree to keep my defenses well-balanced. Of course, this gives me access to phase, giving me 660 physical and spell resistance after a dodge roll. Great for a medium armor build. I've got 30 in the Lady, 10 in Thick Skin, 10 in Hardy, and 10 in Elemental Defender. These passives aren't too terribly important. Like I said, just kind of rounding my defense here, going for the defensive abilities that I need just to reduce the incoming damage by that 5%. And then in my Lord tree, I've got 100 in Bastion, 22 in Quick Recovery, and 5 in Expert Defender. The healing is so great for this build. Can't overlook the healing on this build because we do need it off our rally to stay alive. Expert Defender, you're going to get hit by light and heavy attacks, so why the heck not put some points in here. And then Bastion, we've got Blazing Shield and we've got Brawler, and those are your two really big defensive abilities for this build. Those are your primary defensive abilities for this build. So that's why I put 100 in Bastion, guys. This is where I decided to focus my defenses on this build. Okay, guys, so we're going to jump into the PvP commentary. So, I'm at this resource here. I've got some blues and some NPCs tailing me. Low on resources, as always. Here we go. First thing I'm going to do is jump into the Bat Swarm. I go for the Brawler on both these guys. I get them both with the Brawler. And I go aggressive on this guy here. He's not healing himself. I managed to get him with a really quick execute while in my swarm, and you see here the double B shield pop to keep myself alive, and there's the B shield explosion on that guy with the crit rush to drop him, and then I'm left just to fight this last guy, and the guards here really low on stamina still. This is kind of a tight clip here, but we're gonna use it because it was great. I do a Magnum shot away from his Dawnbreaker there, and then I catch him right at the end of the dodge roll with my Greatsword ultimate, returning my ultimate cost, and there you go. So after running around, I know there's a few more here. I'm looking around for him. I am about to go in stealth. I think I'm trying to send somebody a message or something, and then I realize I got another guy beating on me. So I move behind this pillar here. I've got 3 guys on me again. So I make sure that I got my channel focus down, go into my Bat Swarm with my Blazing Shield up, Brawler on both of those targets. The second Blazing Shield actually finishes them both off. And there you see the Shatter on this build. So much AoE pressure when you need it. Defensive and offensive AoE pressure, and I'm left to kind of fight this guy here, and I finish him off with a quick Magnum shot into the crit rush combo. Okay, guys, that is the end of the video. It was just a short PvP commentary on this one. If you guys liked what you saw, please feel free to hit that like and subscribe button. If you have any questions, please don't be afraid to ask in the description or in the comments below. And finally, guys, I stream live on Twitch. I'll let you guys know through my YouTube channel, so feel free to check me out at JackDanielESO on twitch.com. Otherwise, have a great day, guys, and I hope to see you again.